Hey there, Duke fans. Welcome to the latest episode of the Duke Basketball Roundup. We're recording this. It's Tuesday afternoon. You're probably going to be listening to it on Wednesday. If anything major has happened, don't blame us. But we are here for a couple purposes. One is look ahead to the start of the football season for the Duke football team, a team coming off back-to-back seasons where they won 8 games in each season. We have a new coach on board. A lot of things going on with Duke football, and we're going to definitely be talking about that a little bit later, but we're going to start with some little flurry of news about the basketball team. I am Jason Evans. Donald Wine is with me. Donald, we're at the point now where there's kind of enough going on that you get a little hint here, hint there, little stuff happening, and some really interesting things happening with Cooper Flagg. Right, buddy?
Yeah, and I also, Jason, I think this is the portion of the season for us where, as you mentioned, football is about to start. We're really, really excited about the first year under Manny Diaz and some of the guys that we are going to see on the gridiron. And we get to, try to figure out a way to find a new balance between basketball and football on this show.
All right, wait. Did you have that written in advance? You
Nope.
had that? No, you had.
Nope. None of my
I'm
notes.
impressed. I'm impressed, sir. So, as Donald just alluded to, we've gotten news in the past 24, 48 hours or so that Cooper Flagg has signed a deal with New Balance, the shoe company, the athletic apparel company. They will be sponsoring him. He will be he will be endorsing them, whatever you want to call it. There's no word on exactly how much money is involved here. I haven't seen exact terms in terms of how long it is, although I've seen some talk that it does extend into his pro career. And look, I don't know if there are outs for one side or the other or anything like that. But Donald, if I had to bet, I would guess that this is probably one of the more lucrative, if not perhaps the most lucrative shoe deals ever signed by a college basketball player who has not played a single second of college basketball. I'll go ahead and take a stab, and I'll say that probably for the upcoming year, New Balance may be paying him somewhere between $1 and $2 million. And then my bet would be that the contract probably calls for some kind of escalation when he becomes a pro, because there's a lot more you can do to, promote the company when you are a pro, and there's more freedom in terms of, opportunities to show off your shoes. To be clear, because I've had a lot of people ask about this, Duke is a Nike school. When Cooper Flagg is wearing a Duke uniform, when he is performing official duties for Duke, which means performing in any game, Cooper Flagg will be wearing Nike products because Duke is paid a tremendous amount of money by Nike to be a Nike school. But when Cooper Flagg is not doing stuff for Duke, he is free to wear his New Balance stuff as much as he wants. And then I'll let you get in 1 second, but I did want to add one more thing. If you're wondering why New Balance, why not Adidas, why not Nike, Cooper Flagg feels very deeply about being a guy from Maine. And New Balance is a company that has deep ties to the Maine community. I think I read someplace that they have 3 different factories in the state of Maine.
I believe it's 3 now, but the main one is like 20 minutes from his house in Newport. So
Exactly.
It's one that
Yeah.
he's grown up in the shadows of New Balance, so to speak.
Right. And the ad that they put out very much sort of highlights the small town sort of life in Maine, and Cooper Flagg being a part of all of that and just playing in your backyard as opposed to playing on the playground in the city. A very, very different kind of vibe going on there. Donald, what are your thoughts about Cooper Flagg and this a big deal? I mean, like, as NIL deals go, this is probably way up there, one of the biggest ever.
Yeah, and it's huge for him. It's huge for New Balance. I mean, some of the guys some of the athletes that New Balance has now, they've started to grow kind of assembled kind of a sneaky good roster, right? Kawhi
Yeah.
Leonard, Shohei Ohtani, Coco Gauff, Sydney McLaughlin, Livroni, Tyrone Maxey, Jamal Murray, Zach Levine. Those are some of the athletes, and Jack Harlow on the side as well. But they've assembled kind of a roster of talent here that are big names in their various disciplines, and of course Cooper Flagg is no exception. Jason, you mentioned the fact that, and I'm glad you mentioned it, the fact that he will not be wearing New Balance on the court for Duke because of the Nike deal that Duke has, and also just because NIL at this point doesn't have a lot of rules, but one of the rules the NCAA is firm on is they can't do that on court promotions, right? They can't have guerrilla marketing when it comes to things like that. But I will say this, it was very telling that this morning, Duke released a quick video on social media about, and they asked all the players, what shoes do you like to wear on the court? What shoes do you like to wear off
I
the
saw
court?
this.
And
Yes.
he said off the court, he wears Jordans or New Balances. And everyone's like, oh, that's interesting that, this clearly was, the video was not filmed this morning, right? It was filmed probably a few days ago, and they've cut that soundbite out. But yeah, that was very interesting to do that. But I loved it. I thought the commercial was cool, really, really cool. Personally, is it going to mean I'm going to wear New Balance? Not yet. We're not at that point, but I think it's cool for him. And also I like the fact, again, it kind of brings him back to his hometown. I do think I'm not going to speculate on what the number is that he's getting this year, but I will say, knowing these contracts, he is going to get an escalator, not just when he goes pro, but if, and we all expect this to happen, he goes number one in the draft, because number one in the draft comes with a whole world of possibilities, promotions, and things like that, and they can then use that in all the ads that they want going forward. So this is a big deal for him. It's a big deal for NIL, because I'm sure it probably sets the market for a lot of other people.
Yeah.
And he's not the first guy to get an NIL deal with a shoe company before entering college, but this is probably one of the biggest. And again, it's going to open a lot of eyes to people, because right now it's a market dominated by Nike and Adidas, and New Balance is trying to enter. Who better to do that than with the best player in the country?
Yeah, indeed. And there's one other piece of Cooper news that we want to mention. Duke also put out a video just yesterday about a conditioning drill that they were doing as a team. Everybody took part in what's called the beep test.
Jason, you introduced that absolutely wrong. It is not a conditioning drill. It is the conditioning drill. And
I
if you have
apologize.
ever been in high school soccer, high school basketball, high school football, high school lacrosse, track, anything, the beep test, when you hear that, you still have PTSD. The fact that they put this on video, it was triggering to me. The fact that they had this, because I've had to go through many a beep test in my day. I still hate that drill. But yes, it was a drill that everyone does, and it's a time-honored, rite of passage, it seems, for college athletes.
Yeah, exactly. And the winner of the beep test, the guy who lasted the longest, was in fact Cooper Flagg. And I love the fact Cooper essentially had beaten everybody else in the team. He had shown the greatest endurance of everyone on the team, and he was done. There was nothing more to prove. And yet we saw him do one more lap, one more beep, so to speak. And his teammates, the ones who'd already been eliminated, ran it with him as a way of encouraging him. In fact, I think maybe it was Isaiah Evans. I saw him like push Cooper over the line.
Yeah. So, I think it was Sion.
Oh, man, it was, yeah, I couldn't tell who it was, but yeah.
He's got the strength, so we know
right,
that.
Right. And then they all just mobbed him. And like you say, the beep test is brutal and grueling, and PTSD is a fabulous way to describe it. But I think it is telling that Cooper Flagg, a guy who, look, we got guys like Mason Gillis, Sion James, Malik Brown, guys who've been in college for a long time, who are in peak physical condition. And yet Cooper Flagg is the guy who beat all of them at this endurance test. I know there have been people out there who sort of have jokingly said, with the amount of depth that Duke has, with the number of guys who can play, that you could kind of construct like 2 5-man teams, a first team and a second team, and just shuffle them in and out. But the one thing that they all say is that, but I want Cooper Flagg on both those teams. Now, I don't know that Cooper's not going to be playing 40 minutes, but his success at the beep test, a true endurance gauntlet, tells you that maybe this dude could play 38 without much trouble.
I think it also points to the fact that what we've heard all summer is true. That man does not like losing. He refuses to lose. He always wants to win, and has that competitive edge to want to be the best and to push himself. Because you mentioned the beep test is not a test where you're supposed to try and outlast everybody. You're supposed to go to exhaustion. Whatever your exhaustion may be, if that is 3 beeps, if that is 300 beeps, you were supposed to go to exhaustion. So the fact that he outlasted everyone is one thing, because the beep test is not designed for if the second to last person goes 45, you're not supposed to go 46 and say, okay, I won, I'm done. You're supposed to push yourself all the way to the end. And the fact that he was, again, had crossed the line. He knew he was already the winner and was like, I'm going for one more. And the fact that his teammates, who again are exhausted because they have all completed this test and they are all exhausted, lined up with him to get him to push him on that last, that last lap, so to speak, the last rep. Those are the things that win championships. It's the teamwork, it's the chemistry, it's the fact that they all were supporting him. And even though, quote, they've been beaten, they're still supporting this guy as he does, again, tries to beat himself in a way, beat his mind, beat his, the spirit saying, yo, you're done. Stop running. And he's saying, no, I'm going to push through that mental wall and go for one more. That's the things that those extra reps, they always talk about that in football. They talk about that in basketball. Getting those extra reps where you can, that one more rep, that one more lift, that one more lap, those are the things that, when you have that mental fortitude at the end of the basketball game, you're calm, you're cool, collected, because you've already destroyed yourself in practice. The games it makes the games that much easier. So this is setting us up for a Cooper Flagg who will not be denied, and till the very last end, he will go for it.
Yeah. Hey, one other Duke basketball thing I should say we want to get to before we turn our attention to football. The latest edition of the Brotherhood podcast dropped. Donald, I know you are like me. We listened to the Brotherhood podcast the second it comes out. C. Foss doing a fabulous job there. And this edition is with none other than Khaman Maluach, who just got back to Duke from the Olympics. Khaman spent a lot of time talking about his Olympic experience, which just sounds incredibly cool, incredibly fun. He said he loved watching beach volleyball. CFOS asked him, did you try and play? And he's like, nah, I just watched it.
I'm about to say, imagine him in beach or indoor volleyball.
Yeah. 7-2. He's gonna block some hits, that's for sure. Anyway, he talked a lot about that, but he also talked a bit about his time at Duke so far. I loved the fact that he said he's enjoying being on East with all the other freshmen. He's going out there and playing Frisbee and spike ball. Can you imagine playing spike ball with Khaman Maluach? Come on. And there was one line he had that I adored, Donald. He said, he's been working on getting better on defense, because he was like, if I have a bad game on offense, but I still get 13 boards and 6 block shots, then I had a good game. I was like, 13-6, my man, come on. Those are silly numbers. You could score 0 points. You get 13-6, you're winning the MVP of the game.
John Shire was probably listening to that with that, the Jack Nicholson meme of him going, yes. That was John Shire when he heard that.
Exactly. And there's one other quote or story that we just loved. In fact, we went ahead and we pulled it down off the internet so that all of you can hear it here. If you haven't listened to the episode yet, this is the story about how Khaman Maluach picked Duke over Kansas, over UCLA, that, he couldn't decide, and he ended up flipping a coin. This is such an amazing story. Have a listen right now.
It was really a hard process. Like, I'd never seen anything like that, like such big programs, like schools, like powerhouses. So I visited every school, and then
you visited Kansas,
Kentucky, UCLA,
and Duke.
Duke, yes.
Yep.
So it came down to 3 schools. It came down to UCLA and Duke and Kansas. So then I cut it down to 2, and then when I cut it down to 2, like before I even cut it down to 2, I wake up in the morning, I'd be like, oh, I'm going to Duke. And then at noon, I'd be like, oh no, I'm going to Kansas. And then before I go to sleep, I'm like, oh, I'll go to UCLA. So like that, it kept on, and I couldn't sleep. So when I cut it down to 2 schools, came to Kansas and Duke, and then I couldn't decide where to go. Like, I'm scared. I'm scared of making like this mistake and this mistake. And then I was like, all right, I'll just get a coin and flip it. So I got a coin. So I was like, Duke this side and Kansas this side. So I flipped the coin. And then the craziest part, the coin fell on Kansas side. So when it fell on Kansas side, I was disappointed. Yeah. That's how I knew, like, I want to go to Duke. And I made up my mind. I was like, yeah, I'm going to Duke.
Yeah, it's incredible. Glad you're here, man. We need somebody like you. I mean, you obviously somebody. I haven't played with anybody with your skill set, be able to shoot the ball, run, screen, dunk, block, and change block shots. This guy's going to be really good.
Jason, I'm just going to say it. Best loss coin flip ever. Like, the fact that we lost that coin flip and he was like, man, I was disappointed, and that's what I knew. I hope more people are disappointed by coin flips this fall with some of the guys that we hope are coming to Duke. But that's Jason, that's amazing. That and also it kind of opens your eyes as to some of the decision and the pressure that some of these guys feel about the decisions that they're making and how they end up with it. And of course, naturally, Caleb Foster comes right back and almost immediately with, "Man, we're glad you're here though, because this is what you've brought to the team so far." And he's like, "I've never played with the guy that has some of the qualities and attributes that you do." So I think that's really cool. It's just amazing that literally came down to a coin flip, and we lost the coin flip, and he's still here.
Yeah, we lost, but we still won. Yeah, and just so telling that the guy was like, "Oh, I can't decide," and then it comes up the wrong way, and he's like, "No, wait, what have I been doing all this time? I really want to be at Duke." I love that story. It's a great story. It is worth noting that an international guy like Khaman Maluach, NIL really doesn't play much of a role in the schools that they pick because there are limitations. Frankly,
It's
he's
not
on
even
a
a
student
limitation.
visa.
They can't do it. Yeah, he's on a student visa. He's not allowed to do it. He can only do NIL stuff when he is outside of the country, which of course, very, very, not a lot of time for him to do that during the regular season.
Exactly. So pick Duke for all the right reasons. Not that picking NIL is a wrong reason, but the purist in us sort of loves to hear that. In any event, we're going to take a quick break. On the other side, it's time for us to get to football. The season starts in just a couple days. We got a preview both of what to expect from Duke and what to expect from our first opponent. That's coming at you after this quick commercial message.
Hey, it's Ryan Seacrest. Life comes at you fast, which is why it's important to find some time to relax. A little you time. Enter Chumba Casino. With no download required, you can jump on anytime, anywhere for the chance to redeem some serious prizes. So treat yourself with Chumba Casino and play over 100 online casino-style games, all for free. Go to ChumbaCasino.com to collect your free welcome bonus. Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Hey there, welcome back to the Duke Basketball Roundup. I'm Jason, he's Donald, and this is time for us to talk football, Donald. I'm going to get us started. Before we get to the game against Elon, I just want to talk about something I heard Manny Diaz, the new head coach of the Blue Devils. Just the other day, I heard him say something about season openers, about early season games. I thought was really interesting. He said they all come down to a few different factors. They all come down to conditioning. They all come down to tackling because teams have had such limited tackling in the preseason. Like they're not allowed, they don't want to hurt each other. There are certain rules by the NCAA about how much tackling you can do. So he said conditioning, tackling, and turnovers. And he said the reason turnovers are a big deal is because no one's been hit, no one's been tackled. You know, you're not really used to holding on to the ball. And he said, especially when it comes to quarterbacks. Because he's like, the quarterback hasn't been hit at all. No one is hitting the quarterback in the preseason. So he's like, the first time you hit that quarterback, he's like, oh, whoa, what's happening now? And so Manny Diaz says that is where you see turnovers happen in a preseason game. He also very quickly mentioned that you're going to see more muffed kicks, more bad snaps on special teams than you will, in the first half of the year than you will in the back half of the year. So Manny Diaz laid it out there, Donald. Conditioning, tackling, turnovers. And he says Duke is prepared to succeed at all three of those areas.
Look, I hear everything that Manny Diaz is saying. As you know, Jason, he was the head coach of Miami, so I'm familiar with Manny Diaz's approach to season openers. And I also know his reaction to season openers because it's a famous quote from Mike Tyson. Everyone has a plan until they're punched in the face. And this is the first week, so there's a lot of teams who are going to get punched in the face, so to speak. They're going to get hit in the mouth, like you mentioned. The guy who's been fielding punts with beauty and grace the entire preseason, he gets hit on one, and all of a sudden he's like, "Oh no, like we're really in the regular season now."
Yeah.
And so the idea is, how do you adjust to that? And I think that is where I know this coaching staff is ready to accept that challenge, because there's going to be a point in this first game where Duke has a rough series or what have you, right? And you're going to be like, okay, how do we adjust from there? Not just the players are involved in this, but the coaching staff's involved in hey, let's flip this around. Let's stick this guy over here. Whatever those adjustments need to be made, I think the coaching staff is ready to make it.
You know, and speaking of the coaching staff, I am fascinated. This is unlike most recent Duke opening games because we don't know Manny Diaz's schemes. You may know them a little bit from Florida, but you know, this is not like we have a when you have a returning coach, you usually have a good idea how things are going to work and you know what kind of stuff they're going to try and do. Manny Diaz is new, at least to me, in terms of really watching his teams up close. I know that this is going to be a team that on offense is going to air it out because Malik Murphy, the new quarterback, has a super strong arm. I mean, this is what he is known for, is just that, you know, this guy who can easily wing it 40, 50 plus yards downfield, you know, just in a drop of in a blink of an eye. So I'm sure you're going to see Duke throwing long, maybe more than you have in recent years. Also, frankly, in recent years, Duke has almost always had quarterbacks who were like an extra running back. I mean, look, we saw over and over, Riley Leonard, over Daniel Jones, guys who would take the extra yards, not be afraid to get out on on the outside or even run between the tackles. You're not going to see that, frankly. I don't think from Malik Murphy. He's a guy who's going to stay in the pocket for the most part and take a lick as he gets rid of the ball. Malik Murphy is really big. He's 6'5", 230. I mean, he's linebacker sized, and so I don't think you'll see him going out and running quite as much. So on offense, I think Duke's schemes will be a little different than what we've been used to in the past. And then I'm really excited to see what he does on defense. Manny Diaz is known for a hyper aggressive defensive scheme, blitzes a lot. They go after the football. They try and get turnovers in a big way. And that is what led him to create the best defense in the country at Penn State. I hope we can have something even close to that at Duke next year.
You know, I think, switching to going back to the offense for a second, you mentioned Malik Murphy, and, obviously Malik Murphy, we talked about him a little bit on the last show about the heralded, transfer portal recruit that he was coming from Texas, winning the starting job over Henry Beelan and Grayson Loftus, who, as we know, played a lot last year once Riley Leonard got hurt. But it's the same situation in a way, because Malik Murphy and Henry Beeline and Grayson Loftus all have similar ways of playing. We don't have to adjust at all if one of them are in the game when it comes to throwing. We may not be throwing the ball 80 yards downfield in one play, but at least we have the guy who is capable of running, but we're going to have guys who want to air it out. But what Manny Diaz wants to do is get the ball into the hands of the playmakers. Malik Murphy is going to be a playmaker, obviously, at the quarterback position. But Jason, as we've seen, there's a lot of guys back that we know and love. The Moores are back. Jaquez Moore at running back, Jordan Moore at wide receiver. Eli Panko returns. He was out all of last year due to injury, and he was going to be the number one wide receiver last year, but then he got hurt. He's back. So we have another skilled guy at the wide receiver position. Samir Hagans is also going to be a wide receiver. We saw him a lot last year. And we saw, Jeremiah Hazley and Nicky Dalman Dalmelin is going to be at tight end. So you have guys who are able to get out, get down the field quickly, get the ball, and also do damage after catching the ball. And I think that's the idea. Is Manny Diaz wants to put them in positions where they get the ball and they're able to go and cause damage downfield, putting havoc on the secondary, not necessarily the linebackers and the D line. If they're past them in 2 seconds and they're having to chase them, and secondary guys, yes, they can tackle, but they're not known for wrapping up. Some of these guys are really big, right? Like Jaquez Moore moving downfield. We saw him last year. It's hard to bring down. And if you can get into the secondary, that means we're having a lot more big plays that puts less pressure on our defense, but then it keeps them fresh for what Manny wants to do on defense.
Yeah, I'll tell you something I noticed. I was looking at the two deep, the starter and the backup at every position for Duke, and just looking at the starters, eight of Duke's 11 offensive starters are either seniors or grad students in terms of how long they've been in school. Essentially, they've been in school for 4 or more years. 8 of our offensive starters are guys been in school 4 years or more. 7 of our defensive starters are seniors or grad students. Every other starter is either a redshirt sophomore or a junior, which means they've been there for 3 years. This is a team full. I mean, there's literally nobody under 21 years old starting for any of at any of these positions. They're all guys at least on their 3rd year in school. Actually, that's not entirely true, because there's one player. There's sort of 3 positions where Duke has said, well, the starter could be one guy or another guy. And in two of those positions, the other guy is someone who is a senior or a grad student. But in one case, there is someone who is a redshirt freshman, a freshman. A redshirt freshman is in line to potentially start. And when you're talking about a team where everyone else is third, fourth, fifth year players, and they go, oh no, here's a redshirt freshman who is on par with these guys. I think that is someone worth paying attention to. And that is Keyshawn Brown, 5'8", 160 pounds. He's a wide receiver. He has been described as having electric athleticism. He will be Duke's punt returner in addition to playing a lot of wide receiver. I am super excited to see what this guy's just lightning-like speed is going to be like on display. I think we talked about Malik Murphy being a guy who wants to get the ball downfield. I think maybe one reason that Keyshawn Brown is a potential starter is that he's a dude who will get downfield fast.
Yeah. And also, again, special teams is a battle that we love to win. We had great kickers last year. We have one coming back. Todd Polino's still back as the kicker. Jason, you mentioned how experienced our starters are. The only true freshman that is starting anywhere on the field is Cade Reynoldsson, who will be replacing Porter Wilson on punts. Punts last year, we were second in net punting average.
I wasn't counting that, but yes, you're right.
Yeah, but I mean, anywhere, but like 20, if you think about the guys who were starting, and as you mentioned, the guys who were starting, or the guys who are like the 1A starter on every single position, 28 guys of them are upperclassmen. That is loaded with experience, and I think that is what Manny Diaz wants to do. Now, Jason, I did want to mention something as we kind of end our talk on the Duke side of the football. There is one guy who knows about both sides of this potential of this matchup, and that is left guard Caleb Krings, because he's going to be the starter at left guard. I mention him because he's a graduate transfer. And where did he transfer to Duke from? Elon, where he was a 4-year letter winner and started 36 games, mostly at guard. So as we shift over, he knows the blocking schemes. He's the only starter that did not return to Elon on the offensive line this year.
Right.
So it's very, very interesting that the first game he gets to see his old team, but also I'm sure he was the most important person in practice this week as they figure out what the blocking schemes are, and most importantly, how they approach their defense so that the offense can thrive.
All right, yeah, you just teed it up for us. Let's get to Elon very quickly, and let's be honest. This is an FCS school. This is they are one of the better FCS programs. Not quite in the top 25, but they're a team that gets the also receiving votes in the preseason poll, and there are a lot of people who think that they have a good chance to win their conference. But FCS is different than whatever you call it, the football bowl subdivision.
FBS,
yeah. If you're going to talk about Elon, you have to start with their quarterback, Matthew Downing. Donald, I looked this guy up. I was stunned. He got his career started. First of all, he's from Atlanta, from suburban Atlanta, my neck of the woods. Matthew Downing started his career at UGA at Georgia in 2018. I kid you not. He started his career in the same class as Zion Williamson and RJ Barrett. Daniel Jones was still taking the ball from center at Duke when this kid was at UGA. He is somehow in his 7th year of college. I don't know. I know there's a COVID year. I know guys red shirt. I don't know how he pulled this off, but dude is in his 7th year of college.
It's probably injury along the way that cost him a year and he got it back.
Yeah, I get how it happens, but I'm still like, how are we playing against a guy who started playing in 2018? He played at TCU for a while. He played at Louisiana Tech. I say played at, like at Georgia, TCU, and Louisiana Tech, he didn't play a lot. But he got to Elon last year, and he really played, and he had a great season. He's one of the best of those FCS quarterbacks. He threw for almost 2,000 yards last season, 19 touchdowns, and only 4 interceptions. This is not a dude who makes mistakes. So Duke needs to be a super experienced guy, a guy who has at least practiced against legit Power 5 kind of teams, so he knows what he's doing. If there's a position on offense where Elon is a little uncertain, I think that is running back. Their 2 best players both left the program. It's sort of uncertain who's going to be their top running back. But like
Sean Baker is going to be their top running back, or at least he's going to start, according to what Elon has put out as far as the depth chart. And I think, side note, Duke put out a depth chart on their Twitter, so you can go and kind of see what they are thinking. Obviously, things can change, ladies and gentlemen, but I do think it's cool that to approach the start of the season, they're kind of saying, "Hey, here's what we're thinking. You may see at certain positions." So it's easy. It's easy for us to prepare, Jason, but it also helps the fans kind of understand what they're going for and who's going to be featuring on the field.
Yeah. And speaking of running back, and you mentioned the offensive line. I mean, typically the success of your running back depends on the success of your offensive line. I went ahead and looked. You mentioned 4 of their 5 starters are back. The 5th one's playing for Duke. Their offensive line, in addition to being experienced, is big. I mean, these guys are 300 plus pounds. So sometimes when you play an FCS school, they're just sort of physically overwhelmed by you. Elon does not appear to be a team where, at least in terms of size, Duke is going to overwhelm them. And on defense, I did want to mention very quickly, they got a couple guys in the defensive backfield, especially safety Caleb Curtin. He was a FCS All-American last year. They also bring over a defensive back from NC Central named Khalil Baker, who was a FCS All-American a couple of years ago. So they've got some talent in that defensive backfield. This is not going to be a super easy game for Duke, but this is still an FCS team. It means they're likely going to struggle with Duke's athleticism and speed, the physicality of a power conference team. Even though I talked about they've got some size, just I think in terms of the strength and the quickness, Duke is probably going to have an advantage at virtually every position. There's a reason that Duke is like a 23, 24 point favorite. Jeff Sagarin's computer, his preseason rankings says that Elon is the number 165, number 165th team in the country. He says Duke is 74th. I think that's underrating Duke, but there's a pretty big gap there. Again, as I said, Vegas expects Duke to win this game by better than 3 touchdowns. What do you got on Elon?
Yeah, so I think, a couple things that you did not mention, and you mentioned a couple of guys that I was going to say. First off, the offensive line that you mentioned all 4 other than Caleb Krings is back on offense. Last year, you mentioned their 2 best 2 best running backs have left the program. Well, one of them was a 1,000-yard runner last year. So the fact that you have a offensive line that has returned and blocked for a 1,000-yard runner last year, these guys are experienced. They know how to hit those gaps and hit those blocks well to help people through. So the D line is going to be important, because if they can minimize the running game, or even just get, to put pressure on the quarterback, that's going to really help a lot. One of their wide receivers that Matthew Downing is going to be throwing to, that is one of the best seniors in the country, is Chandler Brayboy. He's not a super tall guy. He's 6'1", but he's super fast and can get himself open. He was able to get a lot of catches last year because of the fact that he was able to get open. And as the season went along, the chemistry between him and Matthew Downing got better. So, of course, now they have had a whole offseason to kind of work with that. And finally, Jason, on defense, you mentioned Caleb Curtin. Not only was he an All-American, he led their team in interceptions and fumble recovery. So he's a guy who wants to be on the ball. He wants to guard the main guy on offense, the main wide receiver, and he wants to be challenged because he likes to rise to those challenges. Again, turning the ball over, we don't like doing that throughout the season, but it's very important in week 1 to not turn the ball over, because especially against an FCS opponent, you do not want to give them any hope that they can come back and win. And you never want to give them a chance to stay in the game. The best way to do that is to keep giving the ball back to them. And so hopefully Duke is able to hold on to the football, score points on most of their possessions, and that stingy defense that we saw all last year, Jason, hopefully that has continued through the offseason. We get to see more of that on Friday.
Yeah. Hey, you mentioned Chandler Brayboy at wide receiver. By the way, Brayboy is an awesome name. If my notes are wrong, what I saw was that he is a 3-time all-conference selection for them. He's a senior. If he's done it 3 times, that means that basically every year this guy's been playing, he's been an all-conference player. That's a special kind of guy who can pull that off. He's definitely someone to watch on their offensive attack.
You mentioned his name, Brayboy, which is a fantastic name. I do want to mention for us Duke fans, he didn't get a lot of playing time the last 2 years, but the Hall of Fame of cool college names is back. Memorable Factor is back at linebacker for Duke. The guy from London, who has an incredible name, for a roster. I don't know how he's moved, how far he's moved up in the depth chart. So don't expect to see him on the field too much this season. But by all accounts, he's a guy who's just an incredible teammate, and of course, he's mentioned in those nice little memes that you have every fall season of the best college football names. Memorable factor. You can't forget that one ever.
No, definitely not. All right, with that, we're going to wrap it up here on episode number, what are we, 655, something like that?
644.
644. I was close. I knew it was double digits. 644 of the Duke Basketball Roundup. I am Jason. He is Donald. A reminder, like, subscribe, and email. Do all those things. Email us, dbrpodcast@gmail.com. Like and subscribe. Leave us a nice review. We appreciate it. Thank you so, so much. We'll be back this weekend after the football game, and all, like football game Friday night. After the football game, talk a little bit about that, and I'm sure we will have more Duke basketball news because it just keeps on coming at us in waves. Until then, that's Donald. I'm Jason, and this is the Duke Band. They're playing us out and taking us home.